Well, Terry, thanks for joining us here at ANZ. You travel around the world a lot, visiting a lot of, I guess, our competitors, but also peers in other countries and banks, and disruption is a topic that we hear a lot about. What are the sort of main areas that you're seeing disruption starting to impact the banking industry?
So Jeff, we've seen a lot of things happening in this sector over the last 10 years. Years after years, the banks have realized that there was not a world of fintech and the world of the banks. Right. The banks have changed, the banks evolved, the banks transform, so do the fintechs as well. And I think it's one big ecosystem today that includes banks and fintechs.
With these thousands of fintechs, what are the models that seem to be working where they're growing and surviving?
For the fintechs to be successful and for the banks to understand with whom to focus attention and work with requires a lot of attention, constant curating of this environment and really maintaining relationship with a whole ecosystem of fintechs and leverage them for what they're good at, which is again keeping their business model very simple and use the power of the bank to spread this across millions of clients.
One of the strengths that banks do have is that scale. What are you seeing the banks that are I guess succeeding in being agile and succeeding in transforming themselves?
So one, banks are incredibly complex and they know that. So most of the banks are launching programs, are running programs in order to drive simplicity and efficiency across the organization. Right. Most of my customers have the same obsession, which is how can I be leaner? How can I be more agile? How can I be able to move faster? Two, nothing is simple. So it takes time. It's massive transformation programs. Banks have different ways to drive the transformation. Module by module, application by application, business line by business line, or some are actually creating on the side a new bank, new digital banks.
Are there any particular ones that you think are standouts, two or three that you might have seen? Happy to name locals or perhaps those in Europe or the US.
I'm impressed by the way the ANZ leadership is driving the change, and I can see clear obsession and motivation to drive this across the organization. If I look at banks like DBS in Singapore that have gone through a tremendous transformation in 6-8 years, going from what I would call a traditional bank to one of the most advanced digital bank. And then I can name many others like Capital One or Wells Fargo in America, a bank like Bank of Ireland in the UK. One point that always I like to always say is that I remember, I think it was 3 years ago, the CIO of Capital One bank telling me, our competitors are not, banks. This is Google and Amazon. At that point in time, when I heard that, it was the first time over the last 3 years I've heard it from many. Sure. So that is certainly sending a signal that things have changed and the power of technology in banks has tremendously increased.
Terry, thanks again for joining me here at ANZ. It was, as usual, a pleasure to catch up again.
Thank you, Jeff.